Like many artists, I am basic and use Procreate for my primary drawing software, and before my iPad, I use Procreate Pocket on my phone. Honestly, I found it by just watching YouTube, and one aunt and uncle with a Christmas gift later, I had an Apple gift card in my possession. I obviously spent this glorious gift on Procreate Pocket. The day after I got my iPad, I went to the local store and got another Apple gift card to purchase Procreate. Now, you may be wondering what I was using before these apps. No one was wondering that. Well, I use what every broke artist used, of course. This isn't exactly a new, insane, original video idea, but I enjoy hearing about everyone's opinions on these apps, and sometimes others leave things out from the program that are really important. It makes me kind of mad when they do that because it inadvertently makes the app look worse than it actually is, or maybe it's completely inadvertently and they just don't like the app and they don't want others to like it either. Anyway, little PSA before we start, this obviously isn't every drawing app that's out there, and there were even drawing apps that I purposely left out just because I didn't have the time to do them all. But we are still about to try 6 alone in this video, so I feel like that is a lot. For the first drawing app, I decided to go back to my roots. Now, I have to say that Ibis Paint is the app in this video that I am most familiar with, and I genuinely believe that it is a great app. Sometimes when I'm bored and I need a change of scenery when drawing, I will go to it. That being said, I see that pretty much every single time someone reviews Ibis Paint and seems to say anything negative about it, or leave something out, they get flamed in the comments for it. People are allowed to have their own opinions on art apps and what they like to draw on. Feeling comfortable when you are drawing is an important part of the process, so if someone doesn't feel the same way that you do about a certain app, then that is that. I understand it's frustrating when they don't talk about insanely important features, but if it is something that is completely opinion-based, then I feel like you should let it go. That being said, I love Ibis Paint so much and think it's a great app for both beginner and pro artists. I kind of needed to get used to it considering it was the first time I had drawn on it for a while. I also made some stupid mistakes like forgetting the fill bucket tool would take into account other layers as well, and ended up spending more time than I should have selecting individual places. I guess I just have Procreate brain. Any praise that I give to the other apps is not even in comparison to Ibis Paint. This app really blows so much out of the water and it is so good. That being said, there are just quality of life things that are a problem for me with it. Acknowledging the elephant in the room first, the ads are everywhere. I don't really want to be distracted while drawing, and if I am recording my screen, I don't want personalized ads popping up either. And I have heard people talking about this, but Ibis Paint pushing Pro more is kind of saddening. Them changing the time limit of using all the brushes after viewing one ad for 18 hours to 4 hours sucks, because if you are making a detailed drawing, it is not nice to get interrupted and have to watch another 30-second ad of a product you aren't even going to buy. I saw a lot of stupid AI art ads when I was drawing to the point where I wanted to throw my iPad across the room. It just feels like Ibis Paint is starting to get more money hungry. However, no other major changes have appeared on the platform since those, so perhaps they realized a lot of people aren't going to like them. It was slower drawing on Ibis Paint compared to Procreate because I think it was just because I'm not used to it and its workspace. One random thing I wish I had was a reference tool like the one Procreate has, instead of having to plop all my references into the corner and try my hardest to get it right. And the lasso tool took some getting used to because all I know is how Procreate's lasso tool works, but since all apps' lasso tools kind of seem to work the same, I started to get used to it after a while. Again, it's not a critique, it's just something I'm not used to. I also just personally like the way I can make things like Gaussian blur and some other things on Procreate better than Ibis Paint, but those are just my own preferences. Ibis Paint is a great app and I would recommend it to anyone that wants to get into digital art and is on a budget, or even if you just want to test things out. It is available on both Android and iOS, so that is insanely great considering Procreate being limited to just iOS because of Apple. Now on to the next app. I have heard amazing things from Autodesk Sketchbook as well, and I've even tried it before, but it didn't really go anywhere because it just wasn't for me. But was it a drawing app that was free? Yes it was. I have more of a love-hate relationship with it than anything. It's a really good app and I love a lot of the features. However, sometimes I just couldn't get used to it. It took me forever to realize you could just change the brush size in the corner with the brush instead of having to go into the brush settings every single time. And I was actually surprised at how much I needed to change the brush size. I never do that normally, I don't think. This is more my fault for continuing to forget, but it annoyed me to no end that when I moved the pencil up or down to change the brush size, it would change the opacity instead, and left-right was the brush size. To me, up and down makes more sense, but what do I know? I'm just an 18-year-old girl talking about free drawing apps while drawing cute women. One thing that also made me want to scream was the delay to undo. I would press my 2 fingers to the screen and for a solid second, nothing would happen. And this particularly sucked when I was doing the sketch because I was moving so fast and doing 5 things at a time and it was just so slow and I just couldn't get past it. I do a lot in my drawings just because I'm so indecisive, so this really knocked down some points for Sketchbook. Another thing I wasn't a big fan of was that clipping layers were hidden behind a paywall. Now I will say that the paywall is a one-time purchase of $3, but I have no money and this is a testing of free drawing apps videos, so I don't want to pay for anything, especially since I don't know if I was even going to continue using Autodesk. But it really sucked for me because I abused clipping masks to no end. I ended up having to use the selection tool to take out anything that was out of the drawing and make it disappear into the void. But it was just something I wasn't a huge fan of. There were some cool things in Sketchbook, like the camera that let you record the screen while drawing, which I planned to use for the entire process, then forgot to turn on, which is most likely a good thing because it is laggy. But what was I expecting, honestly? The fact that it was there alone was enough to get some awe points. I also like the color wheel and how when you picked a color, it would actually show the complementary color above it. I thought this was so cool for some reason. I've never seen another app do this, although I don't think I even used it. The brushes were fine, they were all pretty standard, and I favored using the calligraphy brush for line art instead of the pen because it had better pressure sensitivity. There are also more brushes that you can view if you tap the brush icon on top. Overall, I don't see myself constantly using this app, and some things are just hidden like Procreate and I just can't get used to it. But it is a really good app and I think I'll recommend it to young artists that are just starting out. You just might have to learn patience and what that button at the top means. For this one, I have never heard of anyone actually using this for art. However, it's a drawing app and it's free, so it marks off all the boxes. I will say that this app was both pleasantly surprising and unhappily frustrating at the same time. All the tools were on the left side of the screen for easy access, and some of them were actually quite weird to me. There was one tool that you would just select an entire area and fill it with a color, which I guess would be handy for some people, and then instead of a selection tool, they called it a cutter. A lot of their brushes were mimicking real-life art supplies like pens and paint brushes. An issue I had was that it would commit to adding like the art supplies, like when you layered something it would actually layer and make it darker, which was somewhat peeving to me because sometimes I wanted to use the brush for texture instead of using it for, its intended use. That's kind of one thing I like about digital art, I guess. Texturing is fun. However, this app didn't allow me to do that, and now my line art is translucent. It wasn't that big of a deal at all, just something I noticed. But one thing I found that was a big deal was that when you zoomed in, it would only stay one way. In a lot of drawing apps, you can twist your screen around and see something from horizontal or vertical or any other way you want. But in sketches, you're stuck with the same orientation. I didn't think this was a big deal when I discovered it, but it turned out to be a huge pain in the neck when drawing. Again, though, this is just me and my preferences, so if you like not rotating your screen, then you would be completely fine with this. You could change the size and the opacity of the brush you were using on the right side, which I don't really know how to feel about. But there were also a bunch of options in the right hand corner that included things like Zen mode, where it would make all of the menu disappear so you can just focus on drawing, and stylus changes. And one thing that I found really cool was that you could just record your drawing process from the app by pressing the start recording button. And I have to say that it is far less laggy than the one in Autodesk Sketchbook. Drawing in Sketches was fine, it just took me a rather long time to do it just because of a new app with new things. There was also an airbrush tool that had a texture on the end when you used it that I wasn't a big fan of, but I tried it anyway, and I am so happy this app included almost all the normal layer modes that I use. And that actually had clippy masks that were not behind paywalls, unlike some apps. But I'm not naming any names. One thing that was weird to me was that anytime you edited the drawing, it would save to your photos. So when I was done with this drawing, I found a bunch of times where I edited the drawing in my photos, so that was interesting. On one hand, I liked it so you wouldn't lose your progress, but on the other hand, I feel like it should give the option to turn it off and on. This app is very bare bones, but it was nice to use. I don't think I will ever use it again unless I just need something to play with and de-stress, but overall, it was a nice experience. I wouldn't say it's something you should use if you really want to get into digital art, but it is a good app to play around with and have fun in. It's just minimalistic, I guess. Then again, I'm not you, so use this app if you so desire. The next app I tried out was Medybang, which I don't have a lot to say for just because I'm just confused by it. Medybang is a computer software and I have seen many artists use it. However, computer softwares don't usually translate well into apps, so everything is overwhelming and there are a lot of buttons and so many things are just cramped together. When you zoom in, everything gets pixelated and there are just so many buttons that you need to click on to see what they do. I have played around with this app for quite a bit and I still don't know what everything does, and I don't know if I was just making everything harder for myself while using it. Again, it felt like using a computer program on an iPad, which is way harder than you would expect it to be. There are a lot of shortcuts you can take on your computer that you cannot do on an iPad, and usually mobile apps aren't this crowded and overwhelming. I cannot imagine using this app on a phone. It must be like 10 times harder. It has a lot of ads like Ibis Paint, and they're in a lot of strange areas. Like Ibis Paint, it does give you rewards for using the brushes if you watch an ad. However, it is an hour less, and unlike most apps, their premium is subscription instead of a one-time purchase. You also have to sign in to get that subscription, which I guess makes sense, but I don't like having to sign into things. However, you could just use the app normally without having to, which is great. And instead of just saving it automatically when you exit out, you have to save it, which is really strange to me and kind of bad because I am forgetful and have been spoiled by immediate autosave. I wouldn't say that this is a bad app, it would just take some getting used to. There were random things that I found fascinating and ignited something in my brain every time that it happened. Things that I don't think anyone else is going to relate to. For example, when I was doing line art and the cursor circle was bigger than the line I was drawing, for some reason that just made me think, oh, neat. By the way, this is due to the pen pressure I was using, and if I did it completely normally, then it would have been the size of the cursor. I have no idea why I found things like this interesting, and if you have any theories, leave them in the comments or something. Overall, this is a nice app, and I can see myself drawing in it again if I want to change a pace with no pressure drawing. However, I don't think I would really recommend it for a beginner because it was really complicated and you need to figure out what all the buttons do. And if you already know a little bit about digital art, this is very different considering it's a computer program. Also, this app does include a time-lapse feature for your art. However, you do need to turn it on, and guess who forgot to do that? This dumb. I'm sorry. On to the next app. This one was an interesting one, and the one that I hadn't heard anyone talk about, so maybe it's just a hidden gem. It also has animation in it, so I might try that out as well. Let's go. So, surprisingly, like a lot of apps in this video, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. It was a lot like Procreate with all its buttons and functions, and also just had a lot of things that I thought were super cool. When I first started messing around and drawing in it, I thought all the brushes were in the upper right corner and that it was like sketches with only a few. But turns out it's just ones you can set on your canvas to access quickly. If you click on the brushes on the left side, it will bring you to all of the brushes on this app, and the layout is eerily similar to Procreate. I genuinely found a lot of brushes really cool, although I had to get used to a lot of them because I don't exactly do a lot of realistic painting when it comes to my art. There were some that were there for seemingly no reason, but they made me smile anyway, and there were some that I just thought were really cool. Now, since this app was so similar to Procreate, I found myself defaulting to a lot of Procreate-like things like using the color sample as a fill bucket, which it worked! However, at the top of the left side, there are 3 little dots that you click on and you will find an array of different tools to use, one of which is a fill bucket. Side note that it is really unimportant, but I just found it neat that the canvas had a glow to it so it wasn't just in the void. What ambience. Now, while I am glazing this app, I will say there are a lot of things that I have issues with. Pretty much every time you open the app or reopen the app, it will pop up to ask you if you want to buy premium. This wouldn't be a big deal if it also didn't make you wait so long to continue using. A small X in the corner is fine, but no, for iArtbook, you have to wait an entire minute to get back into the app. Now, you do get a nice back button on the canvas when you press something behind a premium feature, but why can it not just be there every time this thing shows up? But the worst thing about this is what is behind the paywall. Things like Liquify are tools I use so often and I don't realize how much I need until they're gone. However, it's worse when it's taunting me, making me think I can use it, but then a premium thing comes up and I have left static. I also use the reference window quite a lot and also cropping and resizing. However, there's one thing behind a paywall that genuinely makes me mad. Behind the paywall is seriously the ability to save your drawing, meaning I couldn't save my drawing to my photos or to files or anything. The drawing I've shown you is a screenshot I took in the app. I don't understand why this, of all things, is behind a paywall, as it is seriously the entire point of making digital art. The entire point of making digital art is to have the digital art. It genuinely annoyed me, especially with the animation, considering it meant I couldn't export it. So, screen recording of the animation it is. Despite all the many flaws that iArtbook has, I did enjoy using it. And if I got more used to the program, I could see myself using it a lot. But does it mean that I will be using it in my free time when I need a change of scenery? No. It's too much like the thing I'm trying to escape, yet too different at the same time. And not being able to export my drawings really puts a wet blanket on the entire thing. So while I would recommend this app to beginners and even people that already know how to do digital art, please make sure to read the terms and conditions before realizing what you are getting into. Here we are at the end. What a long adventure it's been, but now I tell you all about this interesting app called Artset. Listen, I don't think this app was really made for full-blown digital artists. I think it's just an app for kids to have fun with it. You don't get the normal things that you would assume you would get in a digital art app, like layers and brush sizing and all that, and pretty much all the options that you would want to draw with behave like their traditional counterparts. There is a way to get layers and more things that digital art has, however they are all behind a paywall. Luckily, at least you can undo. Actually, if you go to the plus button with all the paywall items, there are some things that don't cost money to use, and one of them is this thing called Dry. I had no idea what this was, so I clicked it, and after it did nothing, I decided to test a theory of mine and hit the undo button. And it didn't do anything. So there you go. There is a way to basically make all the things you did up to that point permanent. If you haven't noticed how I have been drawing cute girls in all these apps, I would like to inform you that I have been making characters based off the app icons throughout this entire video. I don't think it's very obvious, but you know, I tried. However, with all the things I'm not allowed to use, I don't know if it would be possible to make a character in Artset. So what was I meant to do? I wouldn't say this is the best rendition of Van Gogh's Sunflowers. I would actually argue it might be one of the worst. Will I ever use Artset again? Most likely not, unless I'm just feeling silly that day. Like I said, there are so many things that are just locked behind a paywall, like changing the brush size for some reason, that I just can't live without. And if I wanted to do something that looked like traditional art, then I would just do traditional art. Sure, I don't have any oil paints, but whatever. If you are genuinely wanting to get into digital art, I would not recommend this app. If you just want to mess around and try to draw, or have younger cousins that won't leave you alone about wanting to draw on your iPad, then I think this is a pretty good one. But overall, not something I would be using in the future. At least it has a time-lapse feature that you don't need to turn on, so I didn't forget. Well, I did it. I tested 6 free drawing apps. Some of them were good, some of them were not so good. If you want my honest opinion, Ibis Paint is just always on top for me. I love it so much. Am I going to be switching to any of these programs for drawing? No, I still love Procreate with all my heart and soul. However, if you are on a budget or just want to get into digital art, I think a lot of these apps are really good for you. However, you need to know full well that I recommend Ibis Paint the most. I don't wish to offend anyone with how I have treated their favorite art programs. This is purely opinion based, and if you actually use any of these programs, I'm sure you know more about it than me and are better than me at it. Thank you so much for watching this stupid, unoriginal video where I was just being silly. I really do hope you enjoyed it, and I want you to go do something that made you happy. Do it right now. You have no choice. Be happy. If something that makes you happy is watching another video, then the video on your screen is something YouTube thinks will. All I did was hit the button and YouTube did the rest to recommend the video to you. So check it out. Thank you so much for watching. Love yourself. God bless you.